those who don't know, I'm going to be talking a lot about Wendi tonight, but this is the state of play. We have two hitmen, one that confessed and turned state's evidence at the bottom, Luis Rivera, gave a proffer, told what he knew. He rolled on Sigfredo and Katie. And because of that, Katie was arrested. Sigfredo was arrested, actually was the first one arrested at the news conference, or the first one that was announced. Sigfredo was already in federal prison for a RICO charge for the Latin Kings. And Sigfredo was convicted in 2019. Catherine got a mistrial, and then she was convicted in 2022. And both Sigfredo and Catherine got life without possibility of parole, Catherine got 60 years and Sigfredo got 30 years because he was not convicted of conspiracy, but Catherine was. So Catherine came out of all the three, the hired help, came out with the harshest sentence. But what's funny is, Lewis will probably be getting out soon. I was thinking about it, and so he had 19 years. He got 7 years for the murder on top of the what he was already serving. So it's 19 in total. If he went in 2015 for the RICO, and then you add 19 to it, that'll be something like 2034 or 35. So it's still 10 more years. But then if he gets something called gain time, which I don't even know what that means, he'll likely get 5 years knocked off. So he'll probably be getting out in 2030-ish, which that's crazy to think about. And that's why it pays to cooperate. And he got the best deal. And he was the one that was supposed to not snitch, right, as a gang leader. And then Charlie was convicted in 2023, and Donna was arrested a week after his conviction is charged, and is, going to be going to trial in exactly 3 months. Wendi is labeled an indicted co-conspirator, and the state has pretty much indicated, while she's been on the stand with limited use immunity, to get into a bunch of stuff like the divorce records and to verify calls, just to be very helpful as evidence. And she's batting great score right now, because every time she's testified, she gets people convicted and she makes herself look more guilty. So at the end of the day, I do hope the state goes forward and presses charges against her and at least takes, a bite of the apple. But if they don't, at least there is a little bit of solace, not justice, a little bit of solace in knowing that she has done so much damage to her, the ridiculous things she's tried to sell us while being on the stand with her limited use immunity, and that she could still be arrested. And she probably is in fear of being arrested. But she is a very useful person to help convict everybody else. And that is the way that the state has decided to prosecute this case. So I think, I do think, Jared, they will absolutely, they have to. They're going to look very weak. You have Court TV doing segments. I think the Julie, I forgot her last name, but on Court TV, she said that it was her prediction that it was like a New Year's prediction. It was her prediction that Wendi would be arrested before Donna's trial, which I think all of us probably agree isn't going to happen because she's so useful to convict Donna. But I think that, it just shows where the public's mind is at. The public, that is what the public wants at this point. And I think even though the state's done great work and have a great track record and are moving up the chain, gosh, it will be super disappointing. I think Jack Campbell will benefit as a politician even if he swings and loses at Wendi, right? I think he will, and I guess we'll talk about the things that they're weighing and potentially getting a charge and hopefully a conviction, and then, there's a lot of people that think that Harvey's going to be arrested after Donna's convicted because of the live stream I've done previously that some of you may have seen. It was his car that was given to Catherine Magbanua, and that Sigfredo Garcia, his Lexus, that Garcia was driving when he was arrested in Hollandale Beach at that Exxon. The checks came from his business, and he was very aware of the money going in and out. And that's been proven, that he is very aware of his finances. And we heard him on the calls with Charlie tracking everything and managing everything. So there's a lot of things to point. There was, him caught on the Matsuri tape, and then the Hail Mary, whatever could be on those devices that were seized shortly at the time of Donna's arrest and shortly after, when the FBI took a warrant to their apartment in Brickell and gathered laptops. I think there was even one going back to, prior to the murder in terms of its age. So it could have some stuff on there. So just, who else is going to be arrested? Could be 2 more trials. Could be just one. That's the question. This is the trial, the gift that keeps giving, truly. So anyway, getting into Wendi. Let me see here. So just on its face at a very high level, it's more likely than not, if you just think about it, common sense, use your common sense, y'all, right? As Charlie mocked Georgia on his jailhouse calls, use your common sense. The juries like common sense. They think about it. Wendi is extremely close to her parents and her brother, Charlie. She's testified to that as a fact. And then think about, your brother is convicted of killing your father of your kids, and you're the primary beneficiary of the murder, right? And when you can say all these things like, I didn't know that my mom or my brother knew who killed Dan since 2014, and I just found out today, and all of this, but just on its face, it's very unlikely that you're the primary beneficiary. That was your main enemy that was killed. You brought up the name of who did it within the first 5 pages of your interview, right? That's what Georgia said. And to not put the pieces together, and you're a lawyer, and it makes a lot of sense that you would at least know or have figured out shortly after the murder. And I think definitely a lot of us, if you're watching me, you would probably agree that she did know before the murder. So it's just, it's like, remember when Georgia, one of the first lines that she said when she was crossing Charlie, she says, well, first she says, "Doctor, can I call you doctor?" But then she says, "Have you ever heard that, the most likely," or was it, someone can remember and put the exact phrase she used, but it was like the most easiest explanation is the most likely, whatever phrase she used, but it's just, that's this. It is the most likely. It's the one that makes the most sense. Charlie went up on the stand and gave this very elaborate NASA-like details of how things went, how he whispered to his father about being extorted, and that was the only time he ever mentioned it, and it wasn't caught on the tape. But it just, the simplest explanation, that's right, is usually the right one. That's right, Roxanne. And it is true, right? And so the same is here when we think about Wendi. It's just at a very high level, not getting into the details. Common sense. Use your common sense, y'all. I think that you can really break apart Wendi's motives for being a part of this and getting this done into 1, revenge, 2, just having her freedom, a sense of freedom for her, and then 3, money, setting her up. I think those are were her 3 motives for participating in this murder, which I think I agree with the state of Florida. And I think the FBI, Patrick Sanford, that she was involved in the murder. So I agree with them. So just in terms of the revenge, just the main points is that I think, and I said it on the last live stream, I think that she was very jealous and threatened by Dan's new girlfriend, Amy Adler. She was, we know from Tamara and the interview she gave, on, I think, at the day of the memorial, is that she was very upset when that Dan, she figured out that, and through Jeff as well, that she was very upset that Amy would get on when Wendi was there and Dan was Skyping with the boys. She even said that when she met her recently, she met Amy, and that she had her dad walk her to the door because she was too scared to walk up alone, like very intimidated, and that she had been Googling her. So, and I just wanted to show you, again, this is something that I shared on my in my Patreon, but I'll go ahead and drop the link here for you. Let me share my screen. Go back. I found the article that I was talking about Amy Adler. And it just tells you, it gives you a sense of who she is. Okay, yeah, this Amy Adler, it's in Bomb magazine. Pulling it up. One moment. So here's a whole article about her. Let me drop it in the chat so that you can cut and paste it, maybe open it up in a different browser and read it later. Here it is. So this is about just why I think, if you read this, you'll get a sense of why Wendi had a lot to be jealous of. Again, she's, professor at NYU Law School. Her practice focuses on art, sexuality, speech, explores the relationship between law and the construction of culture. She teaches art law, First Amendment law, feminist jurisprudence, gender stuff. And then this guy goes in and he interviews her and he goes in and watches her. And it's just it's cool. It's very high end. She's got a really super cool job, super intellectual. She is, at the same level as Dan Markel. She, went to Yale. And in here, she goes to the best party. She's got a famous brother. She's wealthy. But in here, there was something about, and she's actually covers very interesting issues, but I can't find it here right now. It's going to take too much to go. But if I want to go back here to my Patreon, I'll show you this little bit that I found. But if you look here, it's you can see here, it said Adler strolled in fresh-faced, dazzling in a crisp Chanel suit and pearls. Along with came her little boy, her own, who promptly seated himself in the front of the class. Not only did her son participate in class discussion, the kid just might have a future in art criticism, but Adler in the next 40 minutes proceeded to create correlations between everything from reality TV to feminist theory to legal precedents. Nothing was safe. She's just cool, right? In a Chanel suit. So it was just a lot to be threatened of, about. It was not Dan dating, just someone average. I think it was, as Donna's emails wrote, it's about winning and losing, right? And Dan hasn't beaten the Markel family yet. This was really good for Dan. This was a trophy. And I think that further fueled her anger, her resentment, and, her willing to be a part of this and essentially kill the father of her children and take their father away. I think the anger and the bitterness was that strong. Because this finding this new girl was on top of already just being pissed off that she's stuck in Tallahassee. So the other thing is that their hobby was hating Danny. Jeff said that she considered him Satan, talked about him all the time. She hated him. And she didn't think that he respected her. She claimed emotional abuse. She said that he was stalking her and that she was, in Jeff's interview, she says that she put together all the things where she thought that he was stalking her and trying to get Gary Cohen, who was a lawyer that offered her the $1 million job and is the one that, was going to come up and testify at the relocation hearing. And Jeff said it made her look crazy. It made Wendi look crazy. And that she also would tell everybody that she never loved him in the first place. So it's easy to kill someone that you never loved, or I guess easier to kill someone you never loved, or I would think it would be. Then you got to think about the legal warfare. She, Jeff said that every time she got one of these motions were filed, she would just lose it and she would be so upset. And she lost her attorney her attorney had to withdraw because of the unclean hands. So, one of the motions he filed attacking her attorney, he accused her of hiding assets. And then even further, this $500,000 legal bomb that he was going to drop, that would show that she perjured herself, threatening to disbar her or say that she had unclean hands and wasn't fit to teach at FSU, and that she should really be punished by the court. The grandma motion, that legal warfare, saying Donna couldn't spend time alone with her own grandkids. And then just the cost of it. We know that, I think Donna said that her lawyer was $600 an hour or something like that. He was costing her a lot of money. And, due to his not allowing the relocation, she lost that legal $1 million job with Gary Cohen that he offered her down in Miami and that she attached to her relocation petition. That was a big deal. Apparently, Donna really wanted that for Wendi, and it was a really big deal she didn't get that job. And so, Donna was pissed, and Wendi wanted that job. So he was literally, I think that Wendi and her family felt like Dan was stealing from her by keeping her in Tallahassee. And I think that fueled the fire as well. I think that Wendi was always jealous of Dan's career. And that goes even back to, back in Ruth's book, saying that they didn't want to mention Harvard at the wedding, that she had driven up with Dan, or to Boca with Dan. And then Dan went to his parents and said, please don't mention Harvard at the wedding. And Harvard was a big part of who Dan was. He was a Harvard man and proud of it. So just goes to show that her insecurity and jealousy over how well he was doing, again, it was war. It was her versus him. And I think that she was he just had gotten this awesome job with the rabbis. And, he was going to conferences as a legal rock star. So and she was sitting there in a job she didn't like, and they didn't have tenure, and then she just had to give up this big job. So again, I think it was more fuel. And then she was probably mad because he told people she was mentally unstable. And a lot of us on this chat would probably agree that we've seen signs of that. And we've heard other people say that, like Jeff Lacasse. And we've also heard Tamara allude to that, people that knew her. So probably spreading that was not helpful and ruined her reputation. And as Jeff said, the worst thing in one of his interviews, the worst thing you can do about Wendi is point out that she's not perfect. And that's what he did with that to her colleagues. And then I think that she hated how religious he was and resented that. And that also, it was mentioned in one of the tributes that Dan's friends wrote about him, that Wendi and her mom were apparently very upset because Dan couldn't attend Wendi's grandmother's funeral, Donna's mother, because it's something religious. He couldn't be in the presence of a funeral, and that really upset him. Upset the family, the Adelson family, and they just couldn't understand that, I think, is how the person that was interviewed, I think it was someone that was interviewed on Over My Dead Body, and that person also wrote a tribute to Dan after his death. And it was someone who, I can't think of the name right now, but she's a writer and does a lot on children transitioning, and she's against it. And I think she's been on Joe Rogan. What is her name? Can't remember, but she wrote a very good tribute to Dan after his death. And Dan actually set her and her husband up, and she knew Wendi as well. So, but apparently, according that, really, Wendi and her parents, her family just did not understand that because he was religious, he couldn't, he considered himself, something like a priest or something equivalent, holy, and then he couldn't attend a funeral. And they were very upset with him about that. And they had agreed that they would raise the kids Orthodox. And then Wendi changed her mind. So I think she really resented how religious he was and how that would affect her kids. And last, I think she was very angry that he didn't pay her the money for the house as stipulated in the settlement agreement. She explained that on the stand the last time, that she was going to take her name off the title and he was going to pay her. And then he came back and said, I'm not going to pay you. And then you even heard in June's testimony, or 302, I can't remember when she said it, but she said when they were asking her, when someone was asking her, why was Charlie, why were they so upset with Dan? And June said, well, he explained that he'd flipped the money on the house, about her, and he'd like flipped the situation. And, he gave that as a reason to June. So I think that they also was another reason to get revenge. Again, withholding money, stealing, hurting her career, ruining her life. And they were going to get him. And then I think it was just freedom. She just did not, she considered herself above it. She wanted to get rid of him. I mean, she wrote a book about it, about getting rid of her hapless, annoying husband, Josh Stone, right? So she was free to locate to Miami, and she went with her parents in South Beach, and she did that 72 hours after the murder. Her freedom not to pay any more legal bills, not to have any more depositions, no more about reopening the divorce settlement, no more custody litigation. So that all that legal stuff went away. She'd have to be free of that. She would be free of the inferiority about how much better Dan's career and life was than hers, going to New York, dating this, very prestigious, beautiful woman that has so much more accomplished than her. And just going and working on these, really attractive cases, like the rabbi case. He was going up, and Wendi was staying like a flat line. Remember, Jeff said that she was depressed and drinking every night. So just no more of that, right? No more comparing it. And then no more co-parenting. So she could make 100% of the decisions. No negotiating, no kosher, nothing. She got to call the shots. She got to decide the schools. If we remember, when reading some of the litigation, the documents going back and forth, Dan asked to have sole say on the education and the religious stuff. And, that did seem a bit extreme in writing when I would read it and hear it. But, that's all gone. She does not have to run, whether the kid will go to a creative preschool. She'll just do that. She doesn't have to worry about feeding them hot dogs. She just has 100% sole custody. And then she can she'd be free of the Markells, the Markel family. She could limit the influence and interactions with the Markel family. They live far away in Canada, and she certainly wasn't going to be taking trips up there. So it'd be very limited when they were in Florida and when they wanted to see the boys. They were not close. They would not be in their lives. So she was free of that. She eventually was free of the name, right? And there was going to be no more Team Danny or Team Wendi. She can be friendly with everyone again and less guarded. So if you remember, I remember some people saying that they were Team Danny, but, at the memorial, they went up to her and said, we'll get together and we'll, support you now that, that Danny's not here and what's really important. So she got to be the grieving victim, widow-ish type figure. And she no longer had to deal with this Team Wendi, Team Danny. She got to absorb back probably some friends that she had lost and got their sympathy throughout all of this. So, and then Dan compromised Wendi. If you think about it, even Jeff said this in his interview, is he said that he asked Wendi at one point, who really knows you? And Wendi said, well, Dan and you. And then we know through her podcast, when she did that podcast a year after the murder, the writing podcast, she said something to the effect of, Dan says that everybody thinks that I'm a good person and that he's the only one that knows that I'm a bad person. And then we know eventually Jeff ended up believing what his therapist was telling him, or psychologist was telling him, that he was convinced for many months that Jeff was in a relationship with a psychopath, a very high functioning psychopath with no empathy. And it's just, so Jeff, the other person that Jeff claims that she said truly knew her, also came around and got to really know her and point out her faults and catch her in the cheating and the lies and everything. So once you, and anybody who's known a narcissist or anyone with a personality disorder, once you figure out they're not who they're trying to pretend to be, it's awful. You're a target. And I think that Dan he did have a target on his back. And I think one of the reasons why is because he knew the real Wendi and he wasn't being quiet about it. So it's, he was every time he walked in a room, he reminded Wendi that he did not worship her and she was not the angel and the everything that Wendi wanted to be perceived as. And I think that was a big threat to her. And she would be free of that, you know. And then Donna would be off her back and it would function as a happy co-parent. So instead of upset Donna, you know, Donna's traveling all the time. Donna is feeding off everything that Dan's doing. And Donna, you know, would have control over what the kids are eating and stuff like that, that she would have a happy mom, right? And remember, Charlie said on the stand, no one wants an unhappy mom. So that was really affecting Wendi, and she'd be free from all of that hysteria that Donna was pumping at her and the unhappiness of Dan. So that would be gone. She'd be free from Donna's complaints and interference in her divorce. And then, you know, so I think that that's it in terms of her freedom. And then the third motive, I think, for Wendi was the money. As we all know that Wendi gets $4,800 a month for her children in Social Security survivor benefits until they're 18. So that's a check that comes in. Wendi said that she won't have to pay the attorney's fees in the divorce litigation. That $2 million life insurance for her children, which is just a trust fund for her kids. So she doesn't really have to save for her kids' future at all, right? Anything that she makes, well, she gets this monthly payment and then she has this trust fund. She gets disbursements from it. So anything that she makes at all is just kind of, you know, like fun money or to save. So her kids have these trust funds and, you know, of course it's $1 million per child, but it's growing. It's in an interest-bearing account. So probably more, but that is a sense of security for sure. Dan didn't have a will, but most of his assets had beneficiaries. Everything went to Wendi and the boys. So, you know, that everything that was Dan's became hers and her son's, essentially. Wendi received the entire amount of the money when the house on Trescott was sold, not just half. Remember, she was fighting just to get her half. When he died, she got it all. And what's really funny is that a tree fell on Trescott on that house and had to be repaired before it was sold. There's an article about it if you Google it. And Dan had a checking account with $15,000 in it. As you remember, Georgia asked where Wendi thought that went, and she said funeral expenses. And then there was that GoFundMe that was set up after his death by Tamara, and that was put in a trust for the boys. So that's on top of their $1 million trust fund, probably much more by now. And then Dan had an IRA of $100K, and that went to them. And as well, Dan had a deferred compensation fund that was $217,000. So she had to stop paying all the costs associated with fighting him legally. And then she got money from the state, trust funds for her kids, and anything that Dan owned came to her and the kids as well. So it was really, and you can go look on my channel. I don't want to play it here now, but Charlie is telling Donna that calling her a trust fund baby and that she hit the lotto and that she got luckier than he ever got. And that he's happy for her, but she didn't earn it. She didn't work for it. She just got lucky. It just all fell on her. That's exactly what he said in those calls. So he obviously does resent her for that, but even though while he's saying he doesn't. So that's a lot of motivation. You're kind of set for life, living a comfortable life without having to do anything for it. And it's funny because Charlie says that she won the lottery and got luckier than he's ever gotten. But at the same time, you remember when he said on the stand that marrying Dan was her biggest mistake that she ever made. So those two aren't exactly in line. Okay, hold on one second.
That policy. I don't know what the value of it was at the time. I do know that.
Can you see that on the screen? I can't see it, but I think that maybe you can.
end of that. Did you or your children benefit financially from your husband's death? Absolutely not. Did your husband have a life insurance policy? He did have a life insurance policy. And what was the value of that policy? I don't know what the value of it was at the time. I do know that his sister's the custodian of that life insurance policy, and I pay taxes on that money every year, but we don't receive any of it. What was the value of it at the time of your husband's death? It was $1 million, not $2 million. $1 million for each child.
She's totally minimizing there. That's so deceptive. She knows exactly how much money it was.
$2 million. All right. And did you believe prior to your husband's murder that you were the custodian of that money for the benefit of the boys? No, we were divorced. So I was the custodian while we were married. But once we were divorced, I was no longer the custodian. So you were aware that he had designated someone else to do that job. You didn't inquire through your attorney about challenging the designation of the sister as the custodian of that money? I wasn't trying to challenge the designation, no. Do you have access personally to that money? No. All right. What about a 401k? Did your ex-husband have a 401k when he died? I believe he did. All right. And are you the custodian of that money for the benefit of the boys? I am. That's how I pay the taxes. All right. Did he have a pension? I don't know.
Okay. Okay, here's where we get into a little bit of the evidence against her. Is that, up at the top, I've got Isom's police report where he mentions that he looks at Markel's life insurance policy and that the policy was obtained by Markel in 2012 and shows his ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, as the primary beneficiary with a payout of $2 million on the same date. So they're going to go check. So he's showing a policy that has Wendi as the beneficiary. And then this is in Ruth Markel's book, The Unveiling, on page 59. She wrote, "The police knew that Wendi asked about Dan's life insurance policy just days after the death. This set off alarm bells for investigators. During Dan and Wendy's separation and divorce, there was a lot of disagreement about money. Dan had taken a large life insurance policy around 2012 during the period when he and Wendi were in marriage counseling, and Wendi knew she was the beneficiary. Following the divorce, Dan changed all the policies, pensions, and investments so that Benjamin and Lincoln were the sole and equal beneficiaries. He did not have a will, but most of his assets had specific designations to the children or went to the estate. But the largest amount was the life insurance policy. Shortly after Dan's murder, Wendi was hungry to know who the beneficiaries were and kept calling the insurance company for exact details." That's damning. That's damning. So this is the stuff that hasn't come out because Wendi hasn't had a trial. But that's not a good look. Remember, she said she wasn't eating for a month and was scared to leave the house. But Wendi, shortly after the murder, it says shortly, the last line there was highlighted, shortly after the murder, Wendi was hungry. So she wasn't hungry to eat. Remember, she wasn't eating, but she sure was hungry. That's a good choice of words, to know who the beneficiaries were, and kept calling the insurance company for exact details. That's damning. That's a very damning evidence right there. Not a good look. Yep, thank you. It was Abigail Schreiner. Yeah, she was the one that wrote the tribute to Dan that sort of told who he was, good and bad. And it was very touching. You could tell she really knew him or saw him, understood him. And maybe I should try to find it, read it at the end if we have time, if I have energy. So this is really bad. It's bad when your ex-wife is calling around, especially after you find out that it was her family that arranged the hit. Yeah, that she's calling around shortly after the murder to find out if she's still the beneficiary. So that's more about life insurance as a video. Okay, this is again from Ruth's book on page 60. It says a GoFundMe page was started by Dan's friends, Tamara Demko, to get some immediate donations. We were so appreciative to Dan's family and friends for their considerations. The proceeds of the funds were later put in trust for Benjamin and Lincoln. Wendi had tried to obtain the GoFundMe donations directly, claiming to be Dan's widow, which added further grief and drama to the process. Again, she's not eating. She's so scared for her life, but she's sure is finding enough energy to be making these calls about money. Right? Not good, not a good look. And claiming to be the widow, that's low. That's really low. So I want to get into the behavior of things that can be used against Wendi. I'm going to break it out a little bit later on, possibly things that could be used against her if she was ever put on trial. But one is just writing her book, and I think that obviously it looks like it will come in now, while the judge, Everett, has not indicated that it's in his verbiage at the end of the hearing when they were discussing whether the book would come in, that it was going to come in, but he would file a motion. So it's not official stating that, but it is, it's just interesting. It's will be much more relevant at her murder trial and not Donna's. And I don't think it will be rebuttal. I think it will be a piece of evidence. And so, a book disparaging her husband, unhappy in a small town, the husband has so many similarities with Dan Markel. I think that in terms of her behavior that makes her look, not innocent is her 18-minute phone call with Charlie the morning of the murder. And I remember June said that in her 302 or one of her interviews, but came from June. June said it was her 302. She said that she did think it looked suspicious that they were all kind of talking in the morning, because Charlie never talks in the morning. He usually talks at night and catches up with people. So the fact that he would call and speak with Wendi that morning and for 18 minutes, and Wendi said it apparently she was calling him and to find out whether to get the TV repaired or replaced. But when the Geek Squad guy told her that it could not be fixed, and I think common sense is that you can't fix a cracked screen. So on a TV like that. Then she made the hitman joke in the statement that she made 5 days before the murder. I think it was on the 13th, after dinner and a movie at her house to Jeff Lacoste, that Charlie had really looked into a hitman in July or the summer of 2013, and that it was a very serious statement. And then she repeated the hitman joke to the repair person the morning of the murder. Those are two really, within the week of the murder, we know through testimony as facts that she told the hitman joke. And Wendi admitted she told the joke in her interview with Isom. But, she denies the statement she made about it being real and Charlie looking into it the summer before when relocation was denied. So that is just really weird behavior that she's saying that and talking about it. And I think I've said before that I think she told Jeff Lacoste that for two reasons, because you got to think about what's in it for her. There's always the possibility that she just could not control herself and it was a slip and she was nervous and she's not good at this, and that it was just an accident. But if you're going to look at what the reasons why she would, as it would be a benefit to her, is one is if the hitman's got caught in any sort of way, fleeing the scene in the act, got pulled over on the way out of town, that I think that she could always say, she could point to her brother, was throwing her brother under the bus, saying, I told people that, Charlie had done this. And, Jeff Lacoste would have walked in there like a soldier and said, yeah, it's probably Charlie, if things started shaking out. And then she knows that her hands were clean, because if we can believe Katie Magbanowa, there was no interaction between her and the hitman, or her and Katie Magbanowa. It's just Charlie was the one that having the interactions, with Katie having a good sense that Donna was aware, but there was no direct. It was only Charlie having the direct communication with her. So, and then I think the hitman joke was just something so I think it was an insurance policy for her, that if things went south, she could have someone come in and that would be more rock solid against her brother. And the hitman joke, is something I think that they probably just said already before things got serious. And so they kind of had to come out. She had to offer that up, because if they had said that joke before, there's truth in every joke. Isn't that kind of isn't that's true, right? They say there's truth in every joke. So if it's a joke, and we know that he really was in the summer 13, there really was that, if we can remember to that person, the jailhouse informant who said that they talked to Sigfredo, and Sigfredo told them that there was a previous attempt with other guys who actually took the money and ran, that, maybe there was, and maybe it was their little joke, cheaper than a hitman, because maybe they tried previously and it didn't work. So that was a little family joke. They like to do little jokes and have little codes. So maybe that was just something they said. And then when the prospect of this started getting really real, they knew that they had to get in front of that joke, because it would look bad if they had told multiple people. The TV alibi is really weird, that she would have that and have that fixed. And again, a problem of knowing that, television screens can't be fixed, and it's much easier just to go get a new TV. She could look that up, Google that, you know what I mean? She doesn't need to have a repairman come and do it, and doesn't need to, coordinate with her mom. Didn't her mom send her email like, honey, the repair for the TV in your living room, it's very obvious. And then with Donna later saying the TV is 5, to tell Charlie that she was being blackmailed, and to give him a sense of what was going on, that it was code, obviously. So and then you got to think about, how did the TV get broken? Someone had to break that TV. If it was going to be the alibi, it's very unlikely just by chance it got broken by the boys. Wendi probably broke it, and then probably kept telling the boys, they were so little, Lincoln, you broke that. And then Lincoln can always go back and say, oh, in his head, and have it stick if he could convince a kid that they broke a TV. But if this was coordinated and she was involved, it's highly likely she was the one that broke the TV. So therefore creating a need for repairmen to come out, right? So that would be her behavior. And then I just did a whole live stream on this previously about the framing of Jeff Lacoste, but so I'm not going to get into it in detail. But there was the framing of him on June 4th, sending him out. She had a very nervous stomach. She just so happened to be so nervous and didn't really know what was going on, that Jeff Lacoste had to go out and get medicine for her and be out at the same time that the hit was supposed to take place on June 4th, when Dan was having dinner, Thai food, for Tamara, for a birthday dinner for her. And then, so there was and then also, all the other stuff she did to frame him, the cars and everything. And then there was the pointing at Amy's ex. Remember, she said she offered Amy's ex up as a person that would be mad enough to do this. And that, that he should be someone that to be looked into, because maybe he wasn't happy about Amy and Dan dating. And then in Tamara's interview, she says that when she went over to the house, it was Wendi and her friend Janine, who was one of the people on the lunch date with her, who was a doctor in town, that her and her friend Janine were trying to say, what about Amy's, have you talked to Amy? Did she ask her husband? And Tamara says she very much got the sense that Wendi was trying to kind of point that up as a very plausible thing that Amy's ex would do this. But if you would listen into, it was, I think, Maya Greenberg and I forgot the guys, the Greenbergs interview. They said that Amy had actually had a very good divorce, and that Dan had told them that Amy said that she had a bad marriage and a good divorce, and that he had and that Dan considered himself having a good marriage with Wendi and a horrible divorce. So it was reversed, and that even when Dan was in New York, because of Amy and her child, she didn't feel comfortable having Dan stay with her, that her ex offered up his apartment if he would be traveling or out of town. So that's your ex being your friend, letting your new boyfriend stay at the house. So it definitely wasn't him, but it was someone she definitely pointed fingers at. And then she lied about hating Tallahassee. And, she told in Tamara's interview, she says that she hated Tallahassee, and she hated Tallahassee even before they were married, and that they were up there, that she did not like it. And it was just something that she thought was temporary. So she never liked it. And she made the same, she told Jeff the same thing, that she never liked it. She drank every night. She was very depressed. Even driving up to movie theaters, she couldn't go into a movie theater in Tallahassee without saying how much better the ones in Miami were. So she was just very unhappy. And then you even heard it in Donna's emails to her, where she said, trying to convince the judge to sort of manipulate the judge. And she was saying, the judge doesn't know how much better South Florida is than Tallahassee. You know how much better it is. But the judge is from Tallahassee. And so, but you know better. So all sorts of evidence. But when asked, said if she liked Tallahassee, she said, well, I liked my job. And apparently she was telling everyone and her friends that she liked Tallahassee after the murder. And she even tried to convince Jeff that she really liked Tallahassee. And that call they had after the murder, he was very perplexed how she did a 180. Said, I liked Tallahassee. I wanted to stay there. So and then, so another thing about her behavior that's going to, I think, be used against her if she ever goes to trial is just how horrendous that podcast was that she did. The Writing Class Radio, she referred to Dan as her latex ex, said that she never, she lacked genuine love for him. She kind of dramatized it about how it was the hitman shot him. My ex-husband was shot in the back of the head by most likely a professional killer. He wasn't shot in the back and the head. He was shot in the face. He saw the killer. I guess that's a sexier way of putting it, in a way that doesn't seem so bad, right? Wouldn't make you feel so guilty having to say it that way, right? That he was in the back of the head. He never saw it coming. He saw it coming. And just all sorts of stuff. And there she said that Dan didn't read her book, and that was repeated around like it was fact, when we know that he did read the book, and he could possibly, call people to the stand who said how much he did promote it in Prosblog, so you could enter that as evidence. But you could also bring people to the stand who, have come forward and say he did read the book, and Dan talked to them about him reading the book and referenced things in the book. So, and there was someone who came to the Markells and told them that, I know. And there was a woman named Lisa who submitted some stuff to the state attorney saying, basically, and I've showed it before on previous live streams, you may remember, about how Dan promoted it and referenced things about how it was funny. And he was trying to get this woman to use her publishing connections, to hook up Wendi. And it was a 3-way Facebook chat, and Wendi was in on it as well. And this woman was reading the book and talking to Dan about the book. And he was like, oh, so glad you like it. Isn't it funny how she put jokes in the footnotes? Like, he read the book, right? And this woman submitted this she knew it discredited Wendi, because she heard Wendi say in that podcast that he didn't read the book. So that's why she sent it in. And then she lied about helping the police with that police statement. That statement she released via Jimmy Junkins. I'm going to read it here in a second. I'm going to go into some of this a little bit later with the evidence, but just to get you warmed up, is that she said, like, I'm 100% cooperating. And meanwhile, she hung up on Isom, and she released a statement saying she was cooperating, but she wasn't. She shut the police down. She was not helping anymore after that initial investigation. And she was lying about it to everybody in town that read that statement. And then she changed the boys' names, and even the middle name of the older boy, Ben. She just dropped that. And so the younger boy kept his middle name, which is Jonah, I believe, but the oldest didn't have a middle name at all, because it referenced Dan's maternal grandmother. She just didn't like it. And she had no interest in helping to solve the case or helping to find the killers. She never, and she did not read any media, or did not, she was no talking about the case either. So she didn't talk to her family. So she wasn't someone who's in a pivotal position to know things, to figure out things. And with her training and her background as a lawyer, she completely took a hands-off approach to finding out who killed the father of her kids, someone that she was with for several years, shared a home with, and, procreated with. And she just did not have any interest. And it was shot in a home that she used to live in. And she had just had no interest for years, never followed up with police, just was not interested. Didn't she say that her focus was, raising the boys, and so therefore she couldn't get into it? It's just kind of, it's not realistic, and it's going to be a hard thing to get a jury to buy, that you just took a hands-off approach. It's not normal. Most people are curious. They're curious to get justice and to get answers, especially something that senseless murder and that violent that's in your family circle like that and affects your children. So, and then, the other behavior that I think is going to be used against her, and she knows it because someone that was at the trial said they overheard, and this person told me personally, so it's firsthand to me. They told me that they were standing around and they heard Laura and Wendi talking before, huddled up before, she was supposed to take the stand. It was someone that attended trial and I saw them there. So it's credible to me. And they said that they heard Wendi go, so what do I tell him about when I, about knowing? And Laura goes, just tell him that you learned today. And so that was her saying she was very worried how it looked. The fact that her brother and her mom knew since 2014, her brother knew pretty much the day of who killed and knew all along. And they kept it from her and let her move to Miami. And, it's just, come on, it's such a salacious thing and they don't tell her. It's not believable. It's not believable. And I think she knew it and she was worried about it. And it even furthers evidence how much baloney it is and how much it could be used against her, because that is how Georgia closed with her when she was on the stand. The last words is that she goes, Wendi said, I learned about it today. When her brother, she goes, Wendi, your brother, how does it feel that, are you mad? Are you mad that your mom and your brother, that's what they're saying. The defense's theory is that your mom and your brother knew all along who killed Dan and they didn't tell you. And she's always saying, you testified in Catherine McDonough's trial and stuff like that. And then Wendi looked at her and very seriously repeated the line, I found out about it today. And then Georgia knew I'm going to close on that. She goes, no further questions, because it's very damning and it will be used against her because it's not a believable narrative. Oh, I got a few more to read. Her behavior of moving to Miami right away, moving to a low security building. So this is that real estate thing that I did, is that she moved from the Icon with, her parents, and they got that little townhome, but she moved from that, which is like super secure, super security, in 2015, just a year later, right around the time she's changing the boys' names because of safety concerns, or she's officially changing it, taking Markel out and making them the Adelson boys, is that she moved to a lower, it did have security, but it had I don't remember, but it had numerous entrances where you just need a key fob to get in. And it's somebody that has lived in big cities and apartments, and the key fob, you lose your keychain and you got a fob, anybody can get it, and so it isn't as secure. And I think there was over a dozen entrances, and there was it was a really big complex with a ton of apartments. So the Courts or something like that. She no longer lives there, but it was not as secure. And I think they had a couple security guards going around, because there's a real estate agent that I know in Miami that was telling me all about it and just saying that that's highly unusual. Someone that knows the area, that you'd be so concerned about security just a year after the murder, and you're changing the names based on safety concerns of the boys, that you would move to something that is as low security as that apartment building, especially coming from something that is very high security. And especially the fact that your mom and your brother know the Latin Kings have threatened your life and you're under threat. And it's only been a year and someone has been viciously murdered and is threatening you, that they would allow Wendi, who was the closest one to the person that was killed with the kids, to move to such a lower security building. It just does not stack up. And I bet that would come up in her trial for sure. And she had a publicly listed address. She did. That address was publicly listed. You could just look her up. There's all sorts of places that you can sign up to remove your information from the web, and she didn't do that. It was easy to look up her address. Then there are behavior that's we already know about, as Lester's, the celebration dinner. She told Jeff that after Charlie had said something to her, after she hadn't eaten, it was more of a celebration that she left the house because she was so fearful Meanwhile, she's calling every financial institution under the sun to find out how much money she can make off this murder. And then I remember something that really stuck out to me, and I think this is really incriminating, is Jeff said that in that follow-up call they had after the murder, that she had said that the kids were having some issues and they were bedwetting and things like that, emotional. But she said, but not about the murder. It's not about the murder. And even Jeff said it was really weird that she needed to qualify that it wasn't about the murder. And why do that? Why not admit that this is very significant and the boys are very affected by the murder? Because it would look in her conscious, having been a part of it and having the boys suffer, it's not something that she could admit out loud, and probably to herself, that her boys are having emotional problems from the murder, because she knows, I think, that she is the source of those problems that the boys are having, and she just can't admit to that. And then someone pointed this out to me on my Patreon, Miranda B, actually, who is a Tallahassee local and a mother and knows a lot of these places. And she told me that she was rewatching, or she knows of, a lot of us have watched Wendy's interrogation multiple times, but she says in that interrogation, she was talking about how Wendi went to the school to eat that week before the murder. She went to go eat with the boys, lunch with them or breakfast or something on one of Dan's days with the boys, or she went to creative preschool to see them. She does that sometimes when it's not her day. And it was like supposedly when she was suffering from laryngitis. And she was like, what mother would go sick to go sit at a school? So if anybody wants to go sort of look that up or find that spot, that would be definitely something, I think. And then she also went on a walk she had a long talk with Jane that week as well. She had laryngitis. But she says that she had laryngitis as a fact to investigator Isom. So if she comes back and says, well, I was just saying that I had laryngitis or that I was sick, that I didn't have to communicate with Dan because he's difficult to communicate with. I knew he'd be upset with me about enrolling the kid in School of Arts and Sciences. Well, she was telling people that it was for a fact, but her behavior didn't seem like she was really that sick. So, and then there's the behavior that's weird is the Lisa correspondence, which I'll show you in a second, which is shortly after the arrests are made. This person found their interactions with Wendi about the arrests just very wide-eyed and suspicious, and I'll read that to you in a second. The estrangement from her brother, Robert. So this has really always been really weird to me, as I remember Robert said on the Over My Dead Body podcast about how his mom told him that Wendi was very upset because all Rob seemed to care about is to talk about who did this or what happened, and wasn't that concerned about her and how Wendi was doing. And, that just really kind of stuck out to me, is that just potentially pushing someone away that's acting like a normal person because he's not a part of this little clique that was in on this conspiracy. And so that estrangement always, that's suspicious, because if Wendi was really innocent and really didn't know about what, and this was done behind her back, you think she would be acting much more normally and engaging with the brother who also didn't know, and having those kinds of conversations that a normal brother and sister would have after a vicious, violent murder of someone that was in their family. So I think that's very suspect, and behavior will be something to point out. I also think never following up with the police. I mentioned that, who would do this? Are you getting any leads? Are we safe? Anything you could tell me to bring me up to speed on, if anything's happening, or is anything you think I should know? Anything I can do to help you? None of that. And then not giving the ring back, the Holocaust ring after the murder. If you think that she was using that as leverage in the divorce, right? Not giving that ring back after she said in a deposition that she would give the ring back if Dan's uncle would ask for it. And he did ask for it and she refused. You would think if she really did have a heart for the Markells, the Markel family, and the grief that they're going through, you think that she would just give that back, right? After his murder, just think, oh gosh, the animosity's gone, I'll give this back to you, but she never did. So I just found that to be very vicious. That would be an easy thing to do, to show some grace and compassion to a family that just lost, their son and their nephew who they loved. But she couldn't even do that. That would just be, it seems like an obvious gesture to make. She knows that the Markells want that back, and she acted like she was going to do it. So I find that very tasteless. And I think that's a point to bring up. And then also disinviting the Markells from the bar mitzvah after Charlie's arrest. As you know, she did reach out and invite them. I think she was doing this as prep because she knows how bad and how much, the Markel bill had already passed. I mean, the Florida House and Senate almost or I think the Senate did unanimously pass the Markel Act, or the Grandparents' Rights. It was a symbolic tribute to the Markells. Even though they can't act on it, it helps people in similar situations. And it's modeled after the horrific treatment that Wendi and her family treated the Markells. So, and the Markells got, after that passed, like within an hour, Wendi contacted Ruth for a visit. So she knows she's in PR damage, reputation control right there. So she's not doing that out of the good of her heart. She's doing it because that passed, and she knows she needs to mitigate the damage somehow. And so it's self-preservation of her reputation. So I also think inviting to the bar mitzvah was also that, because that would look better at trial if she said that they were invited or they did come. She knew that question was likely to be asked, and the pressure was likely to be on the point about how she's treated the Markells and the estrangement with their grandsons. So, but after Charlie's arrest, she called it off and blamed it on the media coverage. So in a nutshell, I'll go into a little bit more in detail, but that's pretty much, I think, the behavior. I've probably missed some stuff, and I'll look in the comments later. And so point them out to me if you see them. Let me see. I really want to point out, too, the overuse of reverse psychology tactics that Wendi used. And it's pretty obvious when you spot the theme, and you can start to really follow a pattern. And again, a lot of the people out in the early days, a lot of the legal academics would come out and say things like, and I'm specifically thinking about David Latt, not to pick on him, because I do know he came around a little bit on Wendi, but he originally thought she was innocent, and he was writing things in Above the Law that stated to the fact of, like, she's a lawyer. She would never sit down for hours without a lawyer if she were guilty. And she would never mention her brother, throw her brother under the bus if she was anyway involved, mention her family or her brother. And while I can see that why he's saying that and why he wrote that and why he took the position, the problem is that David Latt is not thinking like a psychopath. That is very simple. He's doing the sort of like me bias, where he was like, I'm a lawyer. I would never sit for interrogation. Well, of course not. I don't think you'd ever, go as far as committing murder either, and then get on with your life like nothing happened, and then do all these terrible things that keep, the grandparents away from this, the only sort of memory of their sons, and the strongest memory of their sons that they have, by not letting them see the boys. I mean, it's a lot of reverse psychology, a lot of tactics, a lot of things that a normal, compassionate person would never do to another. So it's just a lot of these people that kind of went out, said stuff. They were thinking as if, it was like them, and they just couldn't really think like a potential psychopath, which is, I think, what you have to be to commit murder and, still live a pretty normal day-to-day life and not be, drugged down by guilt. So one thing I think some of these tactics is telling the people about the hitman joke, like Isom and the TV guy, because who would ever joke about something and then actually hire a hitman? Who would do that? That's so crazy. It's reverse psychology. Doing that writing class radio murder. I think even David Latt said if she really was, I think he wrote this, I remember, if she really was involved in the murder, no way she would sit down and do that podcast. Well, perhaps you wouldn't, or any of your friends, but you're not thinking like her, right? You're not thinking about the person Donna raised. You're thinking about someone that maybe it's another friend of yours, or someone that your mother raised, like you. So it's just, that's not how you need to think about it. And then you got to think about, well, one of her best friends, advocates and is an advocate for fatherhood, who is Tova Walsh, who literally gets government grants to study how fathers are good for kids. That's wow, someone who has a best friend that does that surely wouldn't kill the father of their kids and take the father of their kids away. So, and then not even doing the writing class radio, but she, even after it was produced, they did a follow-up where she spoke with one of the producers and had that phone call that was off the record. And they were clearly so excited about. They even said, "Oh, we would ask her a million questions if we could get her on." And then Matt Shear said in that follow-up podcast, clearly during that interview, there was real grief there. You can't, Wendi that was a sincere reaction. I mean, God, he really fell for it. You cannot see how fake that was. And then she posted, and I'll show you the picture, just on doing things that you would think a normal person wouldn't do if they were involved in the murder. And she posted a Facebook picture in April of 2016 that captioned, "I love you, Miami." And this was after the bump. So if she was aware, and she was talking to her brother lots on WhatsApp after the bump, and I'll show you that too. You think that with the bump going on and, everything happening and people trying to shake down the Adelsons for money and relocation being one of the motives for the murder, you think she wouldn't post that. And then she posted a picture on Facebook of Charlie, same in April 16. It said, it was Charlie and her boys, and it said, "Best uncle ever." Right? So it clearly wouldn't be the best uncle ever if he killed their dad. So, it makes her look so like only someone unaware would do something like that. It's reverse psychology. Here's the "I love you, Miami." This is when the bump was going on. More reverse psychology. Telling Jeff Lacoste about Charlie having looked into a hitman the week before the murder. And even though it happened the previous summer, that's clearly somebody who was not about to have a hitman murder Dan Markel would do something or tell her boyfriend something like that. Makes her think about it. That makes her even look kind of innocent, right? No one aware of would do that. That's so puzzling. Reverse psychology. Driving to Trescott that day. She would never take that route if she knew that there was a hitman. She's so smart. She's a valedictorian. Speaking to a TPD without an attorney, turning over her phone, and then letting them search her car. She wouldn't do that if she were guilty. Mentioning Charlie and Katie in that interview, because she does say, "My brother, he's really busy. He has a girlfriend." Buying Bulliet bourbon. We now know that she was asked to do that, but what a quinky dink that she was asked to buy that. That would not be someone who was aware that a murder's happened wouldn't buy a bottle of Bulliet bourbon. And then she had that lunch right before she said, and before on the day of the murder, or I guess he'd already been shot at that point, where she says during that lunch, she was speaking in her interview, she told Isom she was or the victim advocate, I can't remember, that she was speaking poorly about Dan in that interview and how she felt bad about it now. So, and then she also told Isom that her last interview with Dan was not a good one. And if you remember, a lot of what it was about is Dan was wanting to pick the boys up from daycare, preschool earlier and take them swimming. And Wendi was very upset about that. And even Georgia asked her, because she said that the repairman said that she seemed upset that day, and she admitted, "Oh yeah, I wasn't upset about the TV or anything. I was upset because Dan wanted to pick the kids up from school, and he said something like, 'Can I do that and then take them swimming because I'm going away to New York?' And she was like, 'No, I wanted to pick them up,' and she was upset. And she even said she talked to her brother Charlie about it in her interview, and her brother Charlie said, just let him pick them up." But what I think is that what really upset her about that and had her going crazy is that she didn't want Dan anywhere near the kids if there was a hitman on the tail. And that's why she was upset and fighting for him not to do that. So I don't know. It was just something that I thought about. And then posting a picture, and I'll show this to you, of her out to dinner with Charlie only days after he was implicated by the probable cause being released. And on her LinkedIn and Instagram, she was, not so much anymore, but she was constantly, this was more before Charlie's arrest. And when it was just the Sigfredo, Louise, and Katie were implicated, and her family, were all safe at this point, or seemingly so. It's she was posting a lot of stuff about reuniting families at the border, and at the same time she was keeping the Markells away from the boys. She was all about family reunification, and then she was even going to host Senator Merkley into a bookshop, and she was going to moderate it until Justice for Dan put a protest up about how people should write Senator Merkley, and said that while Wendy's separating families in her own life, keeping the boys away from the Markells, that she cannot be a credible advocate and should not be moderating this book event. And they pulled her. They pulled her from it. And I do know, just from being in touch with Justice for Dan back in the day and being on some of that correspondence, that some of her friends, and one of them in particular, I won't say the name, but I've said it before, actually emailed Jason saying like how irresponsible that was and how it put Wendi and the boys in danger. And Jason handled it, but it was, just telling. And then she posts about, and I'll show you this one, posts about too many young men dying posts and the senseless mass shooting, things like that. Just, just over the top. Here's one. I just took this off my Instagram. She posted this on the first New Year's after Dan was murdered. She wrote, "Seeking peace in 2015. And then in November of 2014, she did a post on Facebook, "Another senseless tragedy in Tallahassee. My heart goes out to the victims and their families." It's just kind of just knowing what we know now. Here's that one that's the best uncle ever. In April 20, and the bump's happening at this point. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, the bump's happening. Arrests are coming in May. Best uncle ever. Happy birthday, Lincoln Jonah. See, Lincoln, she uses notice how she uses the middle name so casually in a Facebook post, and I'll get into it later, but Ben has no middle name. He just does not have one. She didn't add another middle name. So she'll just have to say Benjamin. She can't say Benjamin like she can Jonah. I guess she likes the name Jonah. How selfish. And he's not the best uncle forever. He's serving life without option of parole, plus 60 years for murdering that little boy's father, who was a good father, even by Wendy's own account. Okay, there's another thing. I mentioned it. She wrote her book, and they're desperately trying to keep it. It was it doesn't seem like it's a major piece of evidence, and I don't think it is, but for some reason it really drives home the narrative, and it's just that extra puzzle piece that I think really showed that Wendi is full of shit, and this is how she really felt, and it just makes her look foolish getting up on the stand trying to spin it another way. And as Charlie said on those jailhouse calls, that if Wendi, like he was saying it, like if she took that route and drove to the crime scene, and he kept saying, "Wendy's fucking book." He really hated the fact the book came in, but it was it really drove home. He was venting over it on those calls because it wasn't a major piece of evidence. It wasn't direct evidence, but it just somehow just seals the narrative and just is that extra icing on the cake that just makes us all smell like bullshit, right? Because this is how she really felt. She wanted out of the town. She had a husband that she didn't love. She changed the name of the child she adopted in the end and left it all behind. Now, here are the things that I think could be potentially overt acts. I'm not a lawyer, but she needs to do something that's pretty cut and dry. They can prove that she furthered the conspiracy somehow. And because she's a lawyer, because she'd be the first person looked at as the main beneficiary, her mom and her brother really protected her and kept her out of it, right? We've seen that from the evidence. We saw that from the phone call that Donna made to Charlie when Charlie goes, "Does Wendi, is this who's involved?" And then he goes, does Wendi know about it? Is Wendi? And the mom like completely shuts him down, goes, no, 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 no. Like, just don't even know, like, don't bring her up. She's too hot a subject to discuss. Because they know how paranoid she is and how much they would look at her and suspect her. Her biggest enemy, someone she publicly hated and that she would benefit greatly, all her problems would go away. Of course they would look at her. Don't even mention her. She needs to be protected. So, but the drive by the crime scene is, she gave 3 different versions, or she gave 2 different versions, but it was one version, then another version, and the other version again. And you can look here on the right. I mean, this is the crime scene. It was a news story at the time, and you can see that crime scene tape, and you see the lights going. And the officer that was stationed said you could see the driveway. You could see that it was not like, it was a heavy police presence, and it was not a tree down. It was not just, but it was like severe. There were a lot of cars. There was a crime scene van. Like, it was, you would know something's going on. If you knew someone that lived in that house, you would have acted a little differently than Wendi just turning around thinking it was a tree, especially when your kid slept there last night. So it just, the big question is, and, I guess it would just have to be a technical advances in technology, or it would have to be something we don't know about the devices that were seized from Donna after Donna's arrest, that something that could be on that laptop that was in their home or on their phones. There could be something that shows, and if it's WhatsApp or I don't know, but it's something that shows that Wendi sent a message to her mom or to her brother or somebody saying, it looks like something happened. I went by. There's something there. Get ready. I'm going to be calling you from the police station shortly. I don't know. She definitely wanted to know if it had happened. And I think that's why she went down there. It's not a shortcut. She saw what was going on. It's very obvious when you look at the map and you listen to the accounts. There's nothing about a K-turn. She had to go, miles down Trescott. She just did not turn on, we've gone over it a million times. That would be an overt act. That's something you could really catch her. Something on those devices, something in WhatsApp that comes up, some technology advances that shows her sending something saying, it looks like it happened. So it's that crime scene drive-by. And it just makes her look bad. Like I said, I've said before that there was one juror who was kind of the holdout juror in the 2019 trial that Mentor lawyer interviewed. And she said, while she had sympathy for Katie and Fredo's children and didn't think the state proved their case, she did say that it was very obvious that that was not a shortcut as a local person, and that pretty much everyone agreed that Wendi did herself no favors with her testimony, and everyone kind of thought Wendi, the jury did not buy Wendi's testimony. So that's good. That's good for Georgia and everyone to know. I don't know if Wendi would take the stand at her own trial, but the count she's giving is not believable. And I think the person said did herself no favors with that testimony. This could be another overt act, getting his schedule to the killers. So she's in Miami. This is the day after Harvey's birthday party, his real birthday. And she's making sure that he's going to be in town that week. Are you going to be in Tallahassee, July? Why didn't she just say, can I have the kid, I don't know. It's just where she's phrasing it. She's trying to lock him down there. Again, you can make the argument that she just told her mom that, saying, oh, I'm just checking up on the schedule and let's get our schedules out. And looks like, Dan's going to be here. So she could have innocently given it to them. That could be argued. But I think it's one of the closest things to furthering the conspiracy, which would be making sure that he's there in the schedule. And I don't have slides of this because we've heard it, and it's really Donna saying this on the jailhouse calls, and I've done graphics to it. But there's two really things that she says in the non-hang up calls, the hot mic calls, where she's talking to her state lawyer, and then Sue and Rick and Harvey, where she's reading the text out loud that she had sent to Wendi the night of Charlie's conviction, and the day after, it bled into the day after. But she really says, your lawyer protected you. And she says, so now you are innocent. And those are just not things you would say. I don't think you would make, you've got 3 children. First, you've got 3 children and you're depoting them all for your murder trial. But then you've got 3 children. You have one who just wants nothing to do with you and you're estranged from, you don't talk to. You've got another that has just within hours been convicted to life in prison without parole, essentially been found guilty of murder, who, for all essential purposes, their life is over. They're property of the state. They have no really free will anymore. And then your other child, and probably your favorite, your golden child, the one you made in your own image, is kind of ignoring you. And, these are the things that you would not say. First of all, you wouldn't have this child ignoring you because they're scared of being arrested as well. And they're already an undead co-conspirator. But you wouldn't send them messages like this. You wouldn't have anger toward your, essentially, the only remaining child that you can have a real life relationship with. She's mad at her. Why would you be mad at her? She's mad at her because she's just lost a child for the sake of another child, for the benefit of another child. And the other child's not acting grateful enough. Not running over there. She says, I thought she would be running over here. And she was mad. This is her just throwing Charlie under the bus. Again, the first 5 pages of the interview, Isom asks her, do you think anyone would do this for your benefit? And she says, no, who would do this is what she said, which is answering a question with a question, buys her more time, throws her arms up. But first thing she does is she's like, I have this brother, Charlie. But then she immediately says he wouldn't. But what would be the benefit of throwing Charlie? He would be the most obvious. He has open vitriol toward him. He has connections. CD connections, she knows that. He's the one crazy enough to do it for their benefit. I mean, she brings people around Charlie. She probably knows what people think of Charlie. I don't know if Jeff Lacasse was confided in her how weird he thought Charlie was, how scary that he thought he was antisocial behavior. He knew it within 4 hours. Or if she knows Charlie's friends, if Charlie ran his mouth about looking into a hitman, like she ran hers to Jeff. She just doesn't know. He's a loose. Who knows? Why did she do that? And I told you, I think she did it to protect herself. Just in case. And also, it looks better to get in front of the most obvious answer. But I think that's going to be a big question for her. That's why she was so quick to point fingers at her brother. Her interview was so fake. I have it right here to cry, but didn't load, but I could upload it. But anyway, she goes straight from shock to, straight to bawling out, crying. And then she goes in the camera, and we've all watched it so many times before. She cries more and more and more when the camera's not on, and hysterics. She's got all those tissues in front of her. It's just such a fake everything, to the point where, I covered this in the last live stream. She's like, who's next? Who's next? Who would do this, Jane? It's just fake. And you don't probably catch it on the first watch, but you guys and me, we've watched it so many times. But she's not a good actress. It's just, she goes too quickly to hysterics. There's no shock at all. There's no like, what? He was what? And then I don't know. She just she was not a good actress. It's too much. The hyperventilating. Here's the part I was talking about earlier. She did not help. This is so huge. That she did, and talked about not acting right. She did not help. She was not curious to find out. This is the biggest mystery in her life. And she's spinning it as this like murder mystery in her podcast. Like a professional killer killed my ex, shot him in the back of the head, likely a professional killer, and she's just not curious at all what happened in real life. And she's a lawyer, and she was the one best situated to really unravel all of this, and she did not help. But here's a statement that was put out shortly after the murder. It's like a week after the murder. It says Tallahassee attorney Jimmy Judkins, and he was the one calling her. Remember, she's like, my lawyer Jimmy's calling me. It's the one that replaced Kristen Adamson, who had to leave because Dan had accused her of helping Wendi hide assets and not disclose them on the disclosure form, the divorce. It says Tallahassee attorney Jimmy Judkins, who was representing Markel's ex-wife in their ongoing family law case, said last week Adelson is distraught, devastated, scared to death, but still calling insurance companies and GoFundMe to figure out the money situation, and is cooperating 100% with police. And she did not respond to attempts by the Democrat to contact her. So that's a lie. She hung up on Isom. He called her on the way back to Miami. Isom testified that she acted like she had a bad connection, and then almost immediately Laura or Jimmy, probably Jimmy, called her back. Someone called him back and said, Wendy's not going to be talking to you. And there's Isom in the testimony. He said, and this was in the 2019 trial, I believe, and he said, I called her. She, was already at the time on the way in the car on the way back to Miami. That Donna, he'd given her like a day after the Memorial Day, and contacted her the next day after the memorial, and she acted like there was a bad connection, and then had her lawyer call him back almost immediately. And he was so hopeful that she would come back in and help him flush this out a little bit more now that he's gotten to investigate it a little bit much and figure things out. Because when she went in, it was fog of war. He didn't know anything. He was trying to figure out names and get in touch with the Markels. So really what would have been helpful is her to come back after he'd gotten some footing. And Donna and Harvey, they agreed to go in and answer some questions and help them out with the investigation. But they all lawyered up and hightailed it out. So they weren't helping. And here her lawyer puts out something that says she is cooperating 100%. She's not cooperating 100% at this point. She shut down. She put up the iron curtain. It's within her right, but don't spin it. And this probably made a lot of people, professors at FSU, people she knew, it gave them a false impression about what her role is in helping to bring Danny's killers to justice and to light. She was not helping. In here on his March 6th interview, he was much more free with it. He's come to his senses, reviewed his notes, kind of was unraveling all of this, and he kind of thought that the police would figure it out. And he went in right and said, look at Wendi and look at Charlie, and implicated them right away, even when he still was under the spell, as people say. But she said that she hated Tallahassee. She drank every night. She was desperate to get out. She, behind closed doors, she just would not, and he eventually said, I said to her, if we're going to be together, you're not, you're going to have to like Tallahassee. You can't, I'm here. She said, if anything ever happened to Danny. But it's just, and then she switched the narrative that she liked Tallahassee. She didn't mind it. She saw herself being there. It's just, and on the stand, she's trying to make it like she was okay in Tallahassee and she liked her job. It's just, why lie about that unless you're involved and you're lying because it's to your benefit to not make it look like you were so desperate to leave. And if you were so desperate to leave, you were probably involved in the murder. But an honest, innocent person would not lie. She would just have gotten up and said, it, and she was trying for relocation. And even Georges at the time on the stand asked her, how do you feel about, relocation getting denied? And she said, I was relieved. I was relieved that relocation was denied because I really wanted to stay. I mean, whatever. She even wrote a book about it. But why is she lying about that? And she's lying about that for only one reason. It's because she's covering her. She has a reason to lie about it because it makes her look not guilty because she is guilty. An innocent person would tell the truth. Someone, Sunny M says, Fancy, you are wrong. Dan had changed his will and it took Wendi was not his beneficiary. The kids were the beneficiary. Shelley was the trustee. Yes. Oh, I know that Shelley was I'm just saying what was in the police report. So that's what Isom saw when he pulled up the report. And then if you saw in Ruth's book, she went into further and said that when he didn't have a will, Dan didn't have a will, that his beneficiaries, all his assets had beneficiaries. So like his 401k and pension, everything, it was all designated to Ben and Lincoln. So everything pretty much went to the kids and was changed, but he didn't have a will. And that Shelley definitely was the beneficiary. That was Isom in Isom's report. I liked my job. I can hear her saying that. When I read that quote, I heard it in her I liked my job. Yeah, warning her mom to sit down when she called from the police station. And then her mom saying, hold on, let me put your dad on speaker. Let me put you on speaker so your dad can hear. Webster said that he had talked to Isom and that he did unfortunately believe her at first, which is something I've always wondered. Yeah, I heard that too. And it's unfortunate. He could have really tracked down that Best Buy and pressed him guy and asked him, the Geek Squad guy, more of an in-depth statement, just things like that. But yeah, I did hear that Isom thought that Wendi was innocent of this. But not from Stephen Webster, but somebody else. Another big thing for Wendi is the hitman implicates her. While he can't 100% know for sure and had no contact with her, it is pretty significant. And I don't even, as I mentioned in the last live stream about or in the June 4th and the June and July trips and the third trip, but really my last live stream, Lewis, when he was brought in to talk about things, again, he does not have the best memory. He's probably been he was in the gang his whole life. He was, I think, ahead of something. He was a leader in the gang at age 15. I think he had his first child at 13 or something outrageous like that, or 14. But can't read or write. He was doing drugs on all these trips, doing coke. I think he held up people separately. He did a separate robbery on the side in the hotel. That when you get to him 2 years later and think of all the trouble he's gotten in, he's in jail, but all the drugs, he's not going to remember all the little details. And I think it's quite possible that maybe they saw Wendi on the June trip, or that they thought they saw. They were so coked up and paranoid that they thought they saw Wendi, and it wasn't really Wendi. But it doesn't really matter if they saw Wendi the day before the murder, the day of the murder in July, because what that did, seeing a woman that even looked like her, prompted Garcia, the hitman, who got that little piece of paper from Catherine Magbanua and knew that this was for Wendi to get her kids back. He got the person that was hired, or the real guy, he was a ride along, but he, at that point, prompting to see that guy, he said that Sigfredo told him, hey, that's that lady, that's Wendi, that's my homie. He said that. And who's the lady? And he said, that's my homie. I remember her clear as day with them two boys. And they're like, did they meet? And he was like, yeah, I think so. Well, he takes back as well. I don't really know that. I can't say that for sure. But there was some familiarity there. And yeah, I'm sorry, the hitman implicated her. It's being done for her. Her name is being used. The guys that are really the killers are saying the name Wendi. And whether that was Wendi or not, it fortunately got it was the name Wendi, and the fact that it was being done, this murder was being done for her, is very significant that it got to the hitman who was most uninvolved and removed from this altogether. It got him that information, and he was the one who confessed. Period. It was for the lady. So he said on his interrogation that it was for the Wendi. His understanding, it was for Wendi to get the boys, to get full custody of the kids because he had all the custody, and there it is. It's so clear that implicates Wendi. And so while the stipulation was read into court at every trial about the schedule and how it couldn't have been Wendi walking those days, Lewis got a lot of information wrong, right? We've got the owl and the lion. And Catherine McBenowitz said that she never remembered ever calling about the Instagram. So it's these people 2 years went by and they probably blocked a lot of this stuff out. And I know that this guy was doing a ton of drugs. So throughout the years, so that does something to your memory. He got the car wrong when originally in his proffer, he got the model of car wrong that they rented in June. So he really got some things. He got wrong which trip he got the ticket in. He got the ticket in Gainesville. He got wrong about when they arrived in Tallahassee. So there were all sorts of things. He was just, 2 years later to remember like a little weekend trip and everything and the times and everything, it's a lot to ask. And so I can see why he's getting all these things wrong. But it's just pretty amazing that he pretty much got the motive right and he got the name of the main beneficiary and who this murder was being done for right. And it points straight back to Wendi, straight at Wendi. So that is very damning and definitely will be used against her. This is another piece of evidence, is fan favorite Shoderick Nobles. If you go to his testimony, he's wearing this shirt, and it's at this point, about 26 minutes in, and he talks about how when they are having car trouble on the side of the road, that, and Tara Cross is crossing him, that he heard the guys discuss when the car's broken down and he shot the line in the hole. He shot the line when, and then he takes them to like AutoZone or something like that. But he heard them discussing, why don't you call the lady to come get us? Call her to come get us. And there's only one person, a female, who would be in town that could come get them. And he said he didn't hear the name or he didn't know anything. But it's because they know that Wendi's in town. And even Garcia even said, he was very freaked out because he was driving. And he said to Sigfredo, why is she up here? Why is she up here? And he said that Sigfredo got on the phone with Katie. And then Katie said, don't worry, she's cool. She's just making sure, because he's going out of town, making sure you guys are up there and that it's getting done. So they're clearly talking about, oh, we're in trouble. Could we, rely on Wendi? The familiarity there, like they could even Katie could get in touch with her, but obviously they didn't. But that's pretty, they know about it. Makes Wendi seem like she's in on it, right? I don't know. It sucks that Catherine's proffer was so underwhelming and didn't provide any really answers on this. It was really frustrating, but that's what we got. And he did say this. He did overhear them talking about a lady in town. Shoderick, are you in here tonight? Shoderick pops in from time to time. He popped in on one recently. I think on my first one back. Someone said they saw him in there. Believe it. Believe it, Shoderick. It's the believe it heard around the world. He was a star of that trial. And somebody that was in the courtroom told me that when he came in, don't get mad at me, but he came in and he reeked of weed. He smelled like he had just smoked out and came in the courtroom. Swear to God. Believe it. Who in the world is ever going to believe? No one believes that she does not read any media, watch anything, didn't talk to her parents, basically head in the sand for years, blissfully unaware based on the advice of her lawyer. Like she had no curiosity. She must have had willpower of steel to be able to operate like that. Never watched a Dateline. It's just not unbelievable. And as Georgia pointed out, he didn't advise her that until 2016. So for the first couple years, and she didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to talk about it with her brother, Robert. There's a good reason why she didn't want to talk about it. And you know what's funny is that Robert said that when he would ask his mom about it in that podcast, his mom would say, I don't want to talk about it. It has nothing to do with us. I don't want to talk about it. And would just shut him down. So would Wendi. So it makes Wendi seem like she's in cahoots if she doesn't want to talk about it either. You can't be that blissfully unaware with such, it's a case of mass public interest. Your reputation is in the gutter. Okay, lady, your reputation is in the trash. And you don't want to look at anything. You don't want to help figure this out. You don't want to bring justice to your sons. Unbelievable. It's baloney. It's bullshit. No one's going to buy it. You look like an idiot every time you say it. And it is going to be used against you, both in court and, in your everyday life. I mean, it's a reputation killer. You're trying to, there's nothing where people hate to be treated like they're stupid, right? And for you to sell that to us, you're trying to make us all feel like we're just like stupid, and your little giggles and all that, it's not going to mediate how infuriating it is that you're trying to sell us a bunch of crap that everybody knows isn't true. How does Wendi afford her attorney, John Laurel? Well, he probably locked her in about $800 an hour or something like that back in the day, because he's been with her forever. And he probably only really advises her from time to time on responding to things. And he probably, preps her, for the trial. But I just read the financial windfall that she got from Dan, and then she worked at that company Vault. She worked at Impact Fund, and that was a nonprofit, but it was run by a billionaire. So I assume that she was executive director. She had a nice salary there. And then she was at Vault, which was a health startup, and she was the chief of staff essentially to the CEO and the founder. So I assume that maybe she got, I don't know how the company's doing, but I assume she got a nice compensation package that way and a high base salary. Now she's probably not getting anything, but she's probably just living off interest, and she's going to get everything. It's written to the trust in 2020 that she gets everything. Charlie's not in it, the Adelson Family Trust. So she'll, she's pretty comfortable now, and she's likely to inherit all of whatever's left, the apartment, everything from Donna and Harvey. So I think she's okay. I think she definitely can afford him. Shadrach has I follow him on Instagram. He's got some good stuff from time to time. If you go to my Instagram and you go to my following and you put in Shadrach Nobles, you can search who I'm following. You put in Shadrach, you can pull it up. You can follow him too. He sometimes does some stories. Coco T says, where in her police interview does she state that she knew this was going to happen, referring to the murder? Yeah, it's in that ISOM interview somewhere. You can't find it. Someone can help out, Coco. She does say that. I mean, I can hear her saying it. I just don't know at what point she says that. And Roger W says she was asking ISOM, am I a suspect? And then remember she said, I thought that's the way you were treated. I couldn't tell from the way you were treating me in the And I was in the police car. Fancy, you think Wendy's escaping to Mexico? My bet is yes. I just don't know if she'll run. I think she'll stay and face it. She'll probably, honestly, I don't think, think about it, Jack Campbell. It's gonna, people want this. People are foaming at the mouth for it. All right. It's the number one asked question of all time when anybody discusses this case. It is hanging out there like a lead balloon. It's this big ass elephant in the room. So why not just charge her? You got enough. I mean, she's an unindicted co-conspirator. You've gotten all of these other convictions. So you're going to end on a win, even though if you don't get a conviction. I don't think she's going to get acquitted. I think she'll get a hung jury. Jurors aren't going to like her, aren't going to buy the bullshit she's selling. We already know that from juror feedback of past trials. So she'll probably get a hung jury. She'll have to stay in jail, dirty her up, make her pay some consequences, send her to prison, let her understand what it's like. And, there are lawyers that are saying that there's enough. But then I have a lot of lawyers saying that it's just not going to happen, and to brace myself and to, just go ahead and get that understanding that, they don't think that they will. And it's mostly criminal defense attorneys, to be honest. But why not just try? What I'm trying to do is to appeal to the decision maker, and it's a political win. Let's talk politics. It's a political win because right now you're going to look very weak if you don't. I know you want to keep that job. Billy Meggs had it for like 40 years, and he was your predecessor, and he groomed you. So if you want to be like him, then I just really think you need to charge her. All right. We've waited long. It's been 10 years. There's enough evidence on her. Hopefully there's something in Harvey and Donna's, communications and devices, but she's been very disciplined thus far. But yeah, let's go for it. Why not? There's enough there. People are calling for it. Julie from Court TV thinks she's going to get arrested. She was a prosecutor, and she thinks that and she covers this and has talked about this case in depth for months. And she thinks that she's going to get arrested before Donna's trial. So it's not like it's absurd. It's not absurd to do it. Okay, let's get into the names. This makes Wendi look bad as hell. So in Ruth's book, we got to thank her because Ruth will be called as a witness at Wendi's trial. And here's why. She changed the names and she lied about it under oath. So when she was testifying, if you remember, she said that Georgia, and it was at the 2022 trial, Catherine McVenough's retrial. Georgia says, when did you change the names? And she changed them when she enrolled the kids in school, because there's a source, and the sources talk to other people like Mentor Lawyer too. But the source was a parent at the school, and apparently firsthand knowledge, and they've told me this firsthand. They saw it and they gave the account to me that they were told by Wendi, or to the parents, that they had a hard day the first day of school back in that fall of the 14th. Is because Ben ran out of the room crying because they had used the name Adelson and he didn't have the name Markel anymore. That was really tough that he ran out of the schoolroom crying. So, and actually the same source, I don't know if I'll use it, but I have a picture of Ben in the yearbook for the elementary school, where Donna went to go pick him up and stuff, that elementary school in South Beach. And it says Ben Adelson. And they said I could use it. I just couldn't show his picture. But anyway, so yeah, it's that right away that was changed after the murder for all intents and purposes. But read Ruth's account. She says, so Wendi said that on the stand in 2022, when the names were changed, she kept trying to insert in there. And Georgia was just looking for a date. And Wendi kept saying the names were changed after I sent the Dan's family a long email explaining why. And I remember even Georgia going, ma'am, when were the names changed? The names were changed after I sent a long email explaining to the Markels. That's not true. She said that under oath. She said that on the stand. This is what actually had happened, and this will be used against Wendi. And again, what she said under oath can't be used against her, right? Because she had that derivative and use immunity. But we all know, just like how she changed her story about turning on Trescott, we all know, even though it can't be used against her. But it says, nevertheless, in the alternative reality that had become my life, I began to realize that surprises were only constants. I also learned that heartache never ends. In September 2015, Wendi hurt us deeply by emailing me to tell us matter-of-factly that she had changed the boy's name from Markel to Adelson the prior July for safety's sake, as she said. The timing of her disclosure was no coincidence. We were scheduled to visit her and the boys the next day. The boys, so she said, and this was she emailed in September 2015, the day before they were supposed to see. So they had no time to kind of like absorb this, right? Before seeing her and the boys. She kind of like dropped a bomb on them right before, the very last minute. And so Wendi on the stand said that she had changed the name after she sent a long email explaining to the Markels, which is a lie. If you go back and watch that testimony, that's just a bald-faced lie. And she said the timing of her disclosure was no coincidence. We were scheduled to visit the boys the next day. The boys had recently started school, and their drawings had already featured their new names, such as one would see hung on the wall, Lincoln Adelson. This was undeniably disingenuous. There was no safety issue for the boys that could relate to their last name, but the hurt would not be the last. The perception of their deceit was compounded when they discovered that she had even decided to remove Benjamin's middle name, Amitai. I'm going to get killed for butchering this. Amitai. Someone's going to correct me. Chosen to honor my mother. Changing their last names was also particularly hurtful to Phil, whose only son had kept his family name alive through his American grandsons. Names had a lot of meaning to Dan. When Benjamin was born, Danny wrote about this naming in the message to friends and blog readers signed by himself and Wendi. And I heard that that middle name was a debate and that Wendi really didn't want it, but she kind of conceded it to Dan, that he really had to fight for that. And Wendi never liked it, which made sense that why she would drop it. So this is her. This is the right when she's talking about changing the names. She really looked rough that trial. So here's the evidence. So remember how in September 2015, the day before the Markels were supposed to see the boys, Wendi wrote a matter-of-fact email while she had testified in the 22 trial that she had only changed the names after she wrote a long email. That's not true, because September, she changed in July 2015. So months before, she didn't send an email before July. She sent an email after she officially changed their names. And she changed their names, you know, for all intents and purposes when she enrolled the kids in school using they started being called the Adelsons. But if you look here, it's July 8th, Benjamin, you know, there's the middle name. And then look, if you go down, there's no middle name. It's blank right there. But here's the kicker. She lies because you have to do additional paperwork. So it says, is the petitioner requesting that the former name be restored? Yes, there's no former name. It just meant that she would have had to do additional like fingerprints or something. It would have been like an extra step. So it was just a convenient lie. So she wrote yes. So, but it's not. There's no former name. That was his name since he was born. So she hasn't contacted someone. Clues Beekeeping said, Fancy, has Wendi ever contacted you? I bet of all the people, she hates you the most. That's a compliment from Sandy. You do such good work. You present it well. She hasn't contacted me directly, but she's contacted people to find out who I am directly to get in touch with me, if you know what I'm saying. And John Lauro has also reached out to people to find out who I am directly, which is why I tried to keep it under wraps, but other content creators got their ego hurt and wanted to put it out there, so it's out there. And the other content creators have even threatened to call John Lauro because they're so mad at me. It's like, who are we working for? here. The person that's been kind of like pursuing this justice and putting the wiretaps out and kind of generating interest, kind of doing this for the right reasons, or a content creator that's butthurt and just wants to get one over and see me get in trouble. It's absurd. So anyway, if you look here, yeah, she just dropped that. So remember in that post I said in 2016 where it says, best uncle ever, where she said, happy birthday, Lincoln Jonah. And look here, Ben doesn't even have a middle name, right? And she lied about the timing, and Ruth got it out in her books. This is really funny. I've never showed this before, so this is kind of an exclusive. And this just goes to show how long some people, I've been getting a lot of people, I'll just like put something on Instagram or on Patreon and people are like, where are you getting all this stuff? And I was right when arrests happened is when I really started sleuthing this case. And so in 2016, I was like keyboard warrior trying to get as much information. And I took a shitload of screenshots. And so right here, you can see I took a screenshot, I started looking at June. I figured out how June was. So this was, if you look here on the right, you see this just solo picture of, and you can see it there displayed on the original post. But you see it was taken July 9th, which is my birthday, by the way, 2016. And it's just that one single shot of her and Charlie. But originally on July 9th, so the arrests were in May, right? And the probable cause affidavits were released shortly after that, or were coming. But anyway, it was like her family was implicated, and the hitmen were kind of like already tied and known to be the family. So this is in July, and so if you look, I literally have the screenshot. It doesn't even give. It says Saturday, so I literally took it the week. I screenshot it the week in July of 2016. So that's how when this was actually captured. So on Saturday, so it was so recent. But if you look here on the right, you can see Wendi is in there. So this is after the hitman's arrest. The hitmen are arrested in May. And so this told me at the time she's sticking by her family. She has not, I was sleuthing. I was like, so she is involved. She's got her arm around her brother. She's not someone that's so horrified that her family has been implicated. So that told me at the time as a sleuth that Wendi is either involved or can't believe, she's sticking by her brother. And to the right of them, that's one of the Mintz boys, their cousins. And he was living with Charlie for a while. You can hear it on the wiretap calls. I think that's Sean Mintz. And I think now he's like a CEO of his dad's insurance company or something like that. But he was going to med school at Nova. And he was staying with Charlie at the time as a roommate. I think that's his girlfriend. I don't even know who that is. But that at the time, I got that screen grab in July of 2016. And you can see that obviously someone freaked out about it, probably Wendi. And June took it down, which is hence you can look today. Today I went to go see it because I wanted to get the real date of when it was taken. I knew it was in 2016, like right after the arrests were made. But you can see that that immediately was taken down. And so now you really only have the one on the left now, which is really funny. But I got it. But yeah, there in July in 2016, I was like, okay, so she's sticking by her family. Got it. Arm around the brother. Sigfredo and Louise are in prison. That's been tied back to the family. But she's very much. But then it obviously she didn't want that out there because it was taken down. Okay, this is the Lisa text and communication I was talking about. So someone emailed the state's attorney office and came forward and was a friend of Danny's, and this is what they wrote. So this person also sent over some communications they had with Wendi that I think it's not like whatever. Just the person found it suspicious, so it could be used against Wendi. But the person wrote, Ms. Kappelman, okay, I have sent you all the emails and messages and screenshots. Just by means of background, I was friends with Danny through blogging. We both wrote for various blogs, he mostly for profs. Danny knew I was a freelance writer and had a lot of contacts in the book and print media world. He reached out to me to ask for help to help Wendi figure out how to get her book out there. As you can see from the messages, I introduced her to big names in the online print media world. Danny was very proud of Wendi and her book. He wanted me to help her with it. He was very much in love with her and with their family. He called her Mrs. Bear. One other detail until the police announcement in the spring of 2016, I was a staunch Wendi defender. In terms of the murder, not the divorce. While I was furious with how she treated Danny and was definitely Team Danny, I thought it was very unfair that she was being named as a suspect by all these reporters and bloggers and online commentators. I was one of those on websites. And when at the time there was no evidence that she was involved, I was mostly concerned about Ben and Link. They would be someday Google and read about what happened and see people were speculating without basis that their mother was murdered their father. Danny loved his son so much and would have been devastated to have them go through any of this. Therefore, I commented on several blogs and for Justice for Dan Facebook page that people should stop speculating Wendi was involved. Lots of people, including later me, go through terrible divorces and no one kills anyone. Obviously, I changed my tune when the evidence started to come out, then there was actual evidence. So they went on to say, like, this isn't a smoking gun, but it does show Wendi's a little too wide-eyed. And so these are some texts this person had with Wendi, and they wrote, and so if you look on 5/26/2016, that was the day of the arrests, and that the Tallahassee Police Department were going to be doing the press conference. And it's really funny is that I was just sitting on my laptop, and I happened to be in Tallahassee at the time, and I remember the Tallahassee Democrat I subscribed to them on Facebook, and I remember that came up at the news conference, and I remember watching it live on Facebook Live, and that's kind of what pulled me in initially to the story, even though I had heard about it happened. My mom had told me, like, oh, there's this, big thing happening, and there's a murder, and they said it was like a professional hit. It was a professor in Benton Hills. Can you believe that? And I remember my mom telling me that at the time, and I was in New York, and I was like, oh, wow. But didn't really get too much into it. But I remember this, and I was like, oh, I'm going to watch that press conference. Watch this. This is interesting. And I remember they were being so cagey about it being an ongoing investigation and just kind of like being a mystery. And I was like, I'm so intrigued. I was like, oh, I'm going to follow this. And anyway, so this is that day. And this is the communications this person had with Wendi. So they wrote, hey, huge day for you. You doing okay? And she wrote back, thank you. I can't stop shaking. Who is this man? I don't know. Insane. Did they call you last night? We came to Miami to get away from Tallahassee. He lives here in Miami-Dade. No one calls me. I found out on Facebook. You have to be kidding. You are the mother of his children. And she wrote, let's just hope we get answers at 11:30. And the person wrote, is this being streamed somewhere? And she wrote, they're live streaming at 11:30. Okay, I'll be watching. Just like, who is this man? And he lives here in Miami-Dade? I don't know. But then it's really interesting to contrast these communications with Wendi with this from Ruth's book, page 77. On May 25th of 2016, I received a phone call from Craig Isom at midnight to say that they had been gathering serious evidence and several important developments had occurred. They had picked up Sigfredo Garcia, the very first person publicly named by law enforcement involved in Dan's murder. I called Wendi in the morning to give her a heads up that there would be a police press conference later in the day, possibly about an arrest. She proceeded to call me back several times, almost frantically, to get as many details as possible. I was in constant contact with Craig and was advised by him not to have any more communications with Wendi that day. It would be one of the last times I ever had an extended conversation with her. In retrospect, calling Wendi to give her heads up was a result of my desire to maintain a working relationship with her for the sake of the two boys. I was trusting and cared so deeply for the safety of the children. So she wants a lot of details, said she heard on Facebook, and nobody calls her or tells her anything. But she gets a call that morning. She doesn't mention that. And here's something else, is that I have this on my Instagram. It's a pin, so it's at the top if you want to go listen to this little segment. And then it's also here if you want to listen to it. It's a wiretap 5/9/2016 gaslighting girlfriend. You can't miss this thumbnail. You'll probably find it right away. But it is on here that he does say, you can go find it in the two places. He says Charlie was caught on FBI wiretap saying he talks to Wendi all day on WhatsApp, and he's fighting. And the context of it is that the call is that June is mad that he's talking on WhatsApp to this girl Alyssa, and I've shared pictures of her. She's the Philippines girl, and he's at the nightclub with his arm around her. So this is the girl he sees when he's in the Philippines, and so June saw something on WhatsApp from her, and it upset June. And he's in there. They're fighting on the phone. She's saying, tell her that you have a girlfriend. And, she was a romantic interest with her. Like, why are you still talking? We're in an exclusive relationship. And he comes back and he says, I talked to 5 or 6. So 5/9, that's right in the middle of the bump, right? So there's before arrest, remember 5/26. So this is when the bump's going on. And I think they had just retickled the wire. And remember, WhatsApp is not detectable, right? But remember when Georgia said, did you have any, when Wendi was on the stand, did you have any secret meetings with your brother around the bump? Well, maybe she said no, but maybe the correct question Georgia should have asked was, were you talking to your brother a lot on WhatsApp around the time of the bump? Because Charlie directly says here, I talked to 5 or 6 people in my WhatsApp nonstop, my sister being one of them. He says it right there, right in the middle when the bump's going on, that he's communicating with. What are they communicating about nonstop? So you can go listen to that. And then she never allowed solo contact with the Markells after the murder. That's just why. Why? It's cruel. You got something to hide. You hope something's not conveyed. I just think that makes her look really bad, and not like an innocent person would do that. And of course, she loves to blame the foster care. We all know that that's false, that Ruth was just around the time of arrest, around the time of that May 26th communication. Remember, I just read, she said she deeply cared about the safety of the kids, right, with these arrests. And one of the things she could do to kind of mediate that, and she doesn't know if Wendi's going to get falsely arrested. That's the thing, that Wendy's so offended that she would send that letter, because it's like insinuates that she would get arrested and they have a mother and they don't need foster care. But the whole thing is she's trying to make sure they don't go into the state system, which will be much more unfriendly and uncomfortable for them and probably harder to get out. And she doesn't know if Wendi's going to get arrested by mistake, right? Think about it. That happens a lot of time. A lot of innocent people get, arrested and then released. So it's not fair. And even if she did, they begged Wendi to please allow them to meet the kids in the lawyer's office, supervise anything. And she still said no, even, to make sure there would be no mention of anything or no threat of them carting the kids off. But it was just vindictive. And that's really going to be used against her at trial. And it's why she's allowed a little bit of the visitation. And while she kind of teased and pebbled some visitation before these trials, and then cut things off afterward. So, and why they had to do something like pass legislation to get Wendi to concede a little bit. And it only purely for the PR front, in my view, not out of the goodwill of her heart, of what's best for her boys and for the Markells. So that's a big one that'll be used against her. But yeah, going back here, in terms of overt acts, like, gosh, imagine if they could get those WhatsApps. Imagine. What were they talking about so much there in May of 2016? Were they swapping recipes? Were they talking about hair gel? What are they talking about? Were they talking about where they're going to get Harvey for his next birthday? I mean, what? This is also a big one, talked about a little bit earlier in the overview, but this is, I clipped this from my Instagram and I did a video about this. And I think it's on my Instagram and YouTube if you're curious, and it'll look like this. But there's a point in court, and Charlie talks about it. It's a funny talk, and he says, "I got a funny story to tell you, Mom." And he talks about it in the post-conviction jail calls, where he says that he kind of looks over and he sees this girl that looks like Jen Aniston, just kind of smiling at him, and giving him. He thought it was like a groupie. He thought it was like a true crime groupie fan that was, obsessed with him, which is hilarious. And he was flirting with him, and he didn't realize who she was, and he was like looking back, and Dan comes over, and he's telling Donna this. He says Dan comes over to him and says, "Hey, stop looking at your sister. It's your a lot of people here. It's not good for you guys to be, like nodding, communicating." And he's like, "My sister's here. I didn't see her." And he's like, "Yeah, you were just looking at her, just making faces at her." And he was like, "Oh," he's like, "I'm not used to I hadn't seen her a long time. I hadn't seen her hair like that. And she normally wears her hair super curly, and she looks so different in sort of the normal on the street photos that I've seen of her, candid, but she really gets dolled up for these court, when she's obviously going to be seen by a lot of people, gets the blowout, gets everything freshened up. But she goes back and look at the gesture. So say this is the first day she's heard opening statements, which is when she first heard that her brother and her mom had known about this since 2014 and kept it from her. Let her move closer to the killers, let her move to a low security building, and just basically held this over her, And so Georgia rightly asked, "Are you mad about that?" And she says, "Well, I'm confused. It's a lot to process. I'm mad about so many, a lot of things. I'm happy the killer's in jail." She was doing everything but answering the question. And even Georgia goes, "Well, it's hard to separate, I'm confused about a lot of things. It's hard to separate them." And Georgia goes, "Well, try," which is really funny. But if she were really mad or really shocked or really surprised, she would not be giving a look like this to her brother on the day she finds out that he has been hiding, concealing what really happened, the biggest event that probably shaped her and her son's lives. And she's giving him a look of sympathy. It's like a thank you. It's a look of kindness. It's so out of bounds of what someone in her situation, if she really just was learning about the murder and they had been lying to her for years, would give someone, right? That's a look like, "Thank you. I'm so sorry. So sorry you got taken down for what we did. Thank you." It's a look of, that's not a look. That's not a look that fits the story she's telling the public, period. And then this is the point where she talks about how she's not going to be arrested. The state isn't going to arrest me. She's scared of being arrested. Clearly, look at those texts that she sent back to Donna. "I had nothing to do with Danny's murder. I am not guilty. I was not involved in any way. I had nothing to do with, I can't help how the prosecutor used my words. I'm not responsible for Charlie's position." It's just, she is scared of being arrested, even though she says she's not. FBI has been watching her, trailing her, surveilling her. This was during the bump. This is her taking her kids to school. So they're not watching her because they think she's an innocent bystander. They would like to get her for this. And I hope they do, but I really do think Patrick Sanford was sad he did not take it federal after Willie Meggs was a roadblock. And I really do hope one day that they really do go forward and try what they have and hold her accountable for her role in this. I don't think she is. I know that the Castigar issues have made it very challenging, could make it very challenging to prosecute her. But if you really think about it, she didn't really say everything. She didn't give anything without a document in front of her. She really didn't say anything that they're going to use or would need to separate it. If you really, I've watched it so much. I've watched all of her testimony at all these trials, and it's very limited what she gives. And anything that she gives, she can't remember any of the divorce proceedings. She can't remember if the grandparent motion. She can't remember if she sent it to anybody. She doesn't think like she doesn't give anything. She gives nothing new that's like a big bummer that, we can't use that against her because she testified to that. So I just don't really see where yes, it's a little bit messier, but I don't see how that's a big holdback. It's more work, but I don't see that's a holdback. And right now, I have to say 65-35, they're going to arrest her. 65, because I think they'll convict Donna. I do. And I think, I just have everybody in the back of my head that I know that's told me they don't think it's going to happen. That's really just not making the number higher. And honestly, seeing Jack Campbell's press conference after Donna's trial went off the rails and Rashbaum resigned didn't give me a lot of, it didn't seem he wasn't giving like a lot of strong signals that he was eager to prosecute. So I don't know. And that's it. I've probably forgotten something. So tell me if I did. I obviously couldn't include everything, but this was just kind of my overview of things that I think it really comes down to the overt acts, things that she actually did to further getting her hands dirty to further the conspiracy. I think any kind of communication that she could have said for purpose of driving by the crime scene, maybe it was just to prepare herself, but if she did anything to send message down to South Florida that something had been done on WhatsApp, or there was any communications that come up with her coordinating around the bump and sort of trying to cover up the police is, trying to get involved that way in terms of her communications. She's very disciplined. Anything about her giving the schedule would be interesting, or just anything in these communications. But again, I don't have high hopes because she's a lawyer. She's disciplined. She doesn't put anything in writing. Her mom was protecting her from the moment that bump, no, don't bring her up. I don't know. Now I'm going to look at the chat. I think that's it I've got for you. Yeah, at least give it a try. We're so hungry. The public is so hungry for it. I'm telling you, Court TV has really been pumping out a lot. Like Vinnie Politan's doing full segments, like hour longs, like will Wendi be arrested? They're pumping it out there. The appetite is there. It's going to be hard. We know it's going to be hard. But then if it's political and you're not going to 100% get, a chance that you're going to win, it feels political. It feels like we know the state thinks she did it. They have indicated it in these trials. So if you think someone did it and you've got some evidence, I understand you only get one shot, but it's been 10 years. You've got a good conviction rate. Let's see what happens with Donna. Give it a shot. Why not? You'll get a hung jury. I don't think you'll get an acquittal. I don't. Especially if you put Ruth on the stand, expose all the cruelty. Okay, and I'm going to read the chat, and then I'm going to wrap up. Top Cat says, I give it 80-20. Yeah, I mean, it could change day to day, and things could come out about Donna's trial. We could, we're going to be seeing the evidence list, and we're going to be seeing a lot of motions, and, that'll probably sway the odds a little bit for me. Yeah, on Charlie's verdict day, she managed to make it to Orange Theory down the street and do her normal routine just another day in Wendyland. Yeah, and someone who knows Wendi or someone told me. See, someone knows this firsthand and told me. So, but she apparently was sent out a group text to a little circle and was giving away, running a clothes drive, like telling people if they have clothes to come do it, and that she was going to do a donation. And that she did that while Charlie the verdict was out. She was soliciting people to, she was going to do a clothing donation. That text came out while the verdict was which the people were out for the verdict, and that person found it very odd when the jury was out. Yeah, people have sent me, thankfully, a lot of photos of her. I haven't published them all, but she just looks very different from photo to photo. A lot of photos with her boyfriend. Thank you, Carissa. It says Campbell has to okay the arrest. However, Georgia is a lifetime prosecutor. People don't do that for anything else but passion in this case. In this one, Georgia will see through because of her passion. Yeah, she actually she was up for to be a judge, I think somewhere, and didn't get it. So she may, we may, and like Everett's going to go to the appellate. She's going to try. He'll be here for this trial, but it'd be too disruptive, and this is too high profile. But I think that we may lose her unless they move quickly, and it makes me. It's frustrating because they've said in public that they didn't want to move on Donna just yet because, but they had to accelerate their timeline because they're leaving the country. They learned. Anne says, I believe she will be arrested. They have a lot of evidence. I believe Georgia will do what she planned on doing with Donna, take the evidence to a jury and see what happens. Yeah. I hope so. It will be so unsatisfying, so anticlimactic after all of this, all these years, for it not to happen. Yeah, there will be, Anne says, there will be more evidence from Donna's arrest, I'm sure. Yeah, think how much we learned from trial to trial. Like this last trial, Charlie's trial, we learned about paella and the dad's big birthday gifts and things that came out, directly, that, and, a big one at this trial, and it goes to Donna, not to Wendi, but a big one at this trial that we've learned about and through one of these case management hearings is that the text exchange between Donna and Wendi talking about the fact that they heard about Shodrick, believe it, about how it came out that they had, bought drugs for a Coke from somebody up in Tallahassee, and that potentially this could be a drug deal gone bad, and that Danny's stiffed someone on drugs, and there's no reason for them to be speculating about that if they already knew what happened in extortion. You know what I mean? That's really damning. I think it'd be interesting to see how and when Georgia introduced that and how they get that out there, because I just think that just takes all the air out of the room potentially with that, because that just shows that they're lying. The defense will be lying about, if they go, especially since they're locked into this extortion, and Donna being a grandmother just following her scared son's wishes to keep the family safe. Well, you don't be speculating about alternative theories and how amazing it is. You just don't do that. So that's going to be really bad. Old Pueblo Hop says, I think there's all kinds of data associated with WhatsApp that they have, even if they don't know they have all the content, just the timing and volume enough. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what they've alluded. There's a lot of talk about WhatsApp, but the deal is that you can see when a message is sent, but you can't see the message itself. So you can't read the message, but you see the pinging of the communication. And the only way that you could get, because it's encrypted, the only way that you could get that is if you could go in and kind of reinstate WhatsApp and then sign in again, right? So that's my understanding. It may be completely wrong, but I think that's how it was technically explained to me. I hope that she donated her Chanel flats that she seems to favor at every trial. Oh, I didn't know they were Chanel. Someone told me that around the time in Tallahassee before the murder, like around the time before that she wore a lot of Skechers. Like she was really into Skechers sneakers. I don't know why. That's just always, that detail has always stuck with me. Skechers. David says, the book, The Drive-By, The Stupid TV Alibi, this is so sweet. All 5 versions of her driving by, not driving by the crime scene, her horrible police interview where she's trying to cry, dry tears. Yeah, I just feel like, obviously, she's the main beneficiary and she's lied so much to us, the public, and we can see through it. It's so infuriating that she's not being held to task, but there really are legal challenges. It is all about these overt acts. She could know about the murder and be totally legally safe as long as she didn't do anything to help it in any sort of way, to help it go a little bit further. Says Tim Jansen says there's not enough. Never say never. Yeah, but what's really funny is that if you go that previous Instagram post that I showed you about the WhatsApp stuff, talk to my sister all day on WhatsApp, and it's around the time of the bump. Tim Jansen liked that, and I think he sent me a message like, I didn't know about that. So there's anything could come up that can sway, but I've definitely heard that, and it's mostly criminal defense attorneys. But then you have Carl Steinbeck, and you have, like I said, that Court TV ex-prosecutor that has dug into the details and reported on this case. So it just depends on who you speak with. Questions. Are you familiar with all those quotes the prosecution mentioned in the last hearing, read Wendy's book, like the quote about relocation, the judge knowing nothing? Were any of those new? I've read all of the divorce. I've read the divorce file. What does it mean? Like the quote about relocation, judge knowing nothing. Were all those new? No, those were actually was in Donna's email. I was familiar with all the quotes in Wendy's book. Yes, my favorite mic drop moment where I was like, "Oh shit!" That's awesome. Is when Georgia goes, "What's the name of the university?" And Wendy goes, "I don't remember." She goes, "NFSU." For me, that was hilarious. That was like so satisfying. But yes, and then the quote about the relocation judge not knowing anything, or any of those new. Those were in Donna's emails. I'm trying to think of what was new. This is So Sweet was new to me at the time. But then I remember Roshbaum saying on Cross, I think with Wendi, that attached to that was actually a picture. And it was like maybe a picture of Charlie had sent her. So it was something like there was a more specific thing, but I don't know. I haven't seen proof of that, but I kind of remember seeing that that Roshbaum said that to kind of water it down. I mean, yeah, I kind of agree to this. arrest her and then just let her stay in jail for 1 year waiting for trial. It's better than nothing. I know but it's like something, you know, something. I can't be this scot-free, you know. I see what you're saying, and I kind of the wet money. Yeah, Jessica, more than one person has come to me for my next Donna's endorsement deal. Post is it something about a cash washing machine or a money laundering machine that's actual money. And I got to find a way to plot that out and make that work because people are really feeling that people are craving that one. Not as much as Wendy's arrest, but that's what the people want. McGrambalon says number 3. She said life in Tallahassee couldn't compare to South in Florida. And she said something to the effect of like, the judge doesn't know any better, but you know better, Wendy. Well, yeah, I hope that Wendy tries, David says, I hope Wendy tries to flee and she gets busted in some foreign hellhole and gets dragged out by her feet like an animal. Yeah, I mean, she's just visiting El Salvador or Guatemala or something, but she I don't think she'll flee, but gosh, that's another thing that pretty much assures Donna's not going to get away with it. I mean, she really screwed herself trying to flee and she didn't even try to make it, and she booked a one way instead of a return. And I was re-listening to some of the correspondence, and especially in the Mentor Lawyers channel, about her calendar that she had, and she was like emailing her cleaning ladies or someone. I assumed to be their cleaning ladies because it seemed like there was somebody on a schedule she had to let know that she said, I'll let you know when we're back, but we have a family emergency and we don't know when we'll be back, but we'll let you know when we're coming back. But it's the one-way ticket. It's, making the plans, showing Wendy where all the wills are and everything is, and the fast track visa. I mean, she was clearly fleeing, and that's going to look so bad to a jury. And thank gosh, because that and that text that I mentioned earlier about them speculating whether it was a drug deal gone bad, and all the, the dad's big birthday present. And when the first hit didn't work out, Donna sent a text to Charlie shortly after going, and he said, I'm still working on dad's birthday present. She wrote, I know you'll come through for me. I mean, it all looks so terrible. She's not going to get away with it. She'll get convicted. But I'm already thinking, what's next? Yeah, it says that in spring, motion for relocation indicates she was stuck in Tallahassee and wanted to get out of this town. Yeah, and was only there until the husband decided the time was right for him to go. But it's funny is that I think it's Eddie Evans he was the man at this last case management meeting because George and Sarah weren't there. His name's Eddie Evans, and he sort of comes into work like on the jury instructions and stuff, and some appellate issues. He'll come in and sit at the table with the state, but he's the general counsel for the state attorney's office. And he had mentioned that in addition to Wendy's book, that the state also had emails where Wendy said that she was like a prisoner, or she was a hostage in this town, and there were other things besides the book that Wendy sent that indicated. So show some Shoderick videos, Harley. It's so funny. He's such a fan favorite, and he once came into my live streams or someone else live streams, and he said that I was cool and that he wanted to get drunk with me. Can you imagine? Can you imagine me and Shoderick getting drunk together at the bar? That would be hilarious. Partying with Shoderick. You got details, McRambalon. She was called a hostage or a prisoner of Tallahassee in an October 12th email. Well done. That's impressive. That's impressive. Clarissa says there's got to be an overt act somewhere. Please find one. Jen says, Fancy, do you wonder what the victim advocate lady made of Wendi during Wendi's interview with Detective Isom? It's funny you mentioned that because Mentor Lawyer actually found out this moment. He pointed it out in one of his videos. But there is one point in the interview, and gosh, maybe I'll go back and look for it. I don't know if I'll be able to find it on Mentor Lawyer's channel again. But Mentor Lawyer found this moment. Remember, he found it real time. He's like, wait a minute, I think I just found something. The video I watched, but there was one point where Isom comes in and she's like, Wendi's crying or something, and or says something, and Sarah kind of looks at Isom and gives kind of like I know it's bullshit or something, like a smile or something. I don't know. But then I was listening to well, she's going to be, she's getting depoed. I don't know if she'll be a witness, but it's likely the defense are going to pull her in and ask her what her thoughts were and if Donna seemed genuinely surprised. And it's so funny because Wendi turned and kind of planted the seed already, where she looked at Sarah and she goes, "Do you heard that? Well, they seem surprised, so that's a relief." So that's what they're going to do. My bet. Audrey says, I've never had a pair of Skechers. Neither have I. Neither have I. Glag for Life says, I like Brooks. Brooks sneakers. All I wear is On Cloud. And I've got this one pair. Now it's out of stock, but I've had the same pair and I've ordered it 4 times in a row. Charlie needs some fan mail encouraging him to flip on Wendi. Have you ever seen that pen pal letter I did about Charlie? It's funny. I would pull it up now, but I think it's getting too late. I wrote it from an Asian girl with a backpack, and I wrote, as like, Dear Charlie, I'm in high school and I'm looking for a pen pal, and it just like basically says everything that he wants. It's really funny. Saying I want to share deep, dark secrets and talk about the stock market. All right, I'm going to wrap up here. I'm going to make sure if there's anything good before I go. Thanks for hanging out with me. Anne says, I'm afraid what steps Wendi is taking to keep boys away from Markel's when she gets arrested. Yeah, I think Ruth has even said this publicly, that Wendi gets to decide where the kids go, if she is. So it's not like they'll automatically get them. Like Wendi can make plans. McGranville says, he looked down and read George's notes. Haha, they refer to the defendant Wendi's emails and friends. Yes, that's what I'm referring to. Did you know about any of those previously? I'll hit you up on Patreon. Yeah, no, I didn't know about any of those emails. Yeah, but the state has all her emails. I'm sure there's some stuff in there. They just got to get the right people to comb through them. Find stuff. Overt acts. Overt acts. I want to get a t-shirt that says overt acts. That's what we need. Overt acts, and then I'll put Wendi 2025 on the back. All right, guys, thank you so much for everything. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your week and a great weekend. And happy Friday. So thank you for being here. Let's hope this all pans out. I think they have enough. They have enough to charge and just take their chances after Donna. If they get another conviction. So overt acts. And thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Talk to you later.